So how can you know? How can you know if you are projecting or perceiving, right? Are you in love with this story or the idea, or are you in love with the soul? And I feel like this is where the 4 questions that we have really comes into play, right? We have taken time to create 4 questions that you can begin to ask yourself. Now, we're not saying these are the only 4 questions you can ask, but it has to start somewhere, right? And this is a good place to begin to explore and say, I wonder, and let me begin, because often it's not even about the question, it's about the beginning of the dialogue to explore and seek to understand. And then that starts you on the journey. So let's start the dialogue. And we have these so that we can make certain we get the questions to the letter. And we will also make sure that they are in the show notes so that you can reflect back and pull them up. But just begin, right? Begin to reflect and understand. If you feel like this is you or someone you know, then just start here, right? So do you want to start with question number 1?
Absolutely. So question number 1 is, do I feel peace around this person or pressure them to be someone else?
Yeah. And part of the reason to explore that question is if you feel like you need to change someone, that they are a work in progress, then there will consistently be this desire in you to offer them suggestions for change or see them as your masterpiece somehow. Now, I'm not saying there won't be times in relationships where you're helping each other grow. But if it's constant, and I mean constant, it might be something to ask yourself. We all have different kinds of relationships. This is not saying that your relationship is defined by this question. It is a place to begin exploring. If you are constantly in this place and you do not have peace, there is not a moment where you feel, okay, now we're good together. There's nothing to change. There's not a moment to be present together because there's always something that needs to be worked on. You might want to visit that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, again, back to movies. We see this in movies or TV shows, and we always hear that, he or she likes a project, he or she goes for those broken ones because they can fix them, and that's, it really, it does show up, and it's kind of viewed as like funny, but the reality is that it's super unhealthy. And so when we are attempting to make ourselves feel better by quote unquote fixing someone else and building them, because they're broken, again, now we're placing that relationship externally. We are projecting what they should be instead of complimenting on who they are and seeing potential. And I think that's maybe the fundamental difficulty that we have is differentiating between and I know this is kind of something we've been kind of discussing through this, but just to be ultra clear, it's really, really tough to differentiate between projection and potential. Because just because we think someone should be X, but have we taken the time to really talk through? Is that even who they want to be? And so if we're so busy saying this is what they should be and not taking into consideration, that's where it's going to be really hard for you or for anyone to have those peaceful moments and to not feel like they need to keep changing someone because basically their identity is tied to it, not like their own identity is tied to it, not the other person in the relationship.
That's such a key point, right? And that I think is the difference between connected growth or projected need for the other person to change.
Yes.
So moving on to question 2 to begin to explore. If you're sitting in silence together, do you feel connected or do you feel anxious? Right? And this isn't something, again, these aren't like all the time. It is just something to understand the majority of the time. What is the overwhelming feeling? If there's projection that is occurring, then typically it is, oh, I need to do something. I need to do something. I need to do something. Because you're in the past or you're in the future. If you're connected, you're in the present and your souls are just sharing, right? And there's a desire to be present in the moment with one another. And that anxiousness just kind of begins to fade away. Generality, I understand, but entry point. So begin to ask yourself and understand. Number 3.
Do I notice their authentic light or mostly their potential? And again, this is another key differentiator because we talked about projection versus potential, but now what about potential versus authenticity, basically, as a whole? And so that's a tough one. And I feel like there's a lot of people could really relate to this because how many times, whether it's a friend, coworker, maybe you've actually hired someone, for example, maybe it's a parent or a child, or there's so many different type of relationships other than romantic in this actually we experience in different ways. And it's how much, like, maybe on paper it looks amazing and it should look amazing, and it's like, hey, this is exactly what I think it should be, but the reality is that it isn't that. And everything you're attempting to do, or everything, maybe both of you are attempting to do it, and that's admirable and wonderful. But if it's just still not a fit, because both may be looking at the potential of each other, or one may looking at the potential and the other is not living up to that potential, just because someone can do something doesn't mean they have to. It doesn't mean they should. Maybe they are very happy not living up to their potential. I'm not neither here to condemn or condone that choice, but that's the authentic light that we're talking about. If we're so focused on who we think they should be, then we're going to miss out on who they already are. And who they already are may have far more potential than the projection that we're placing on them. And so it just may be a stair step into their light. And maybe their light needs just to be brightened more. And what's happening is we're unintentionally dampening and darkening their light because we think it should be X instead of Y.
We think it should be shown in this way, but what they actually want to do is shine it this direction.
Yes.
Right? And so just because on paper it looks like it should shine this way, it's a light, right? It's so bright. And like any light, they could choose to pivot it and shine it here or here or here. We just happen to have our lens over here and we think, oh, you should shine it over here where my lens is pointed. Well, says who? They get to decide where they want to shine their light. So maybe they want to pivot it and shine it over that direction. So let them decide where it's going to shine, right?
Yeah.
And stop projecting from your lens of reality where you think they should shine their light. That is something to sit with. And you're right, there are all kinds of different relationships, including our partnerships. And so if we're just projecting and not connecting and communicating, how do you know if your partner desires to shine their light in the direction you think it should be shown?
Absolutely. And maybe their authentic their authentic self may not align. And so learning how to effectively let go and allow someone to be who they are, whether or not you're together, that's a really tough one to move through, because that, again, that could happen in work, or maybe you feel like you have someone that's perfect for the job. You can't buy passion. You can't, they're just really right for it, and it's so great. But all of a sudden, just the way that they work just doesn't align with the organization. It doesn't make them wrong. It doesn't make them bad or anything. It doesn't make you wrong or you bad. It just means it's not a fit. It's not a frequency. It's like attempting to reach, 80 an AM radio station through the FM radio. It's just not going to happen. You're not going to find it. Both are great, great radio stations, but it's just, they're just in different areas. And so that's why I feel like that one is such a really strong way to understand.
Start to explore.
And then I think it leads beautifully into number 4.
Yeah. Which is, am I attached to the projection or the idea of the person? Or am I in love with who they are now? Right? Which is very different. It really goes back to, I'm in love with their potential. I'm in love with who I believe they could become, or who I could make them if they just listen to me. Right? Talk about an ego moment and an ego death if they don't, which is where a lot of us, I did it. I know. I've been there. I have t-shirts, right? That saying, where we get to a point where we feel like, all right, they have that potential. And if I can help them tap into that potential, I'm in love with where they will get to in the future. Well, that means that you're in love with your ego, right? And I'm just ripping the Band-Aid off there because I've been there.
Yeah.
And I had to rip the Band-Aid off for myself. That was a very ego-driven thought, because it wasn't about them at that point. It was about me thinking that I knew better for them. And how unfair of me. Because that took out of the equation what they wanted for their own life. Instead of now, where you and I am in love with every little thing that you do. Even the things I do not understand. And there are plenty of them. And I'm sure you have the same for me. You're probably like, why would she do that?
I keep Austin weird.
You do keep Austin weird. But what that allows me to do is always stay on my toes. So then I can quickly turn it back and go, I don't understand why he just did that, but that means I have something that I can learn.
I'm always like, why is she on her toes? There's better ways to stay.
So when we can do that, when we can go, I don't know why they're doing what they're doing, but what does that show me about me? And what can I learn about myself as a result of that? And be in love with the person as they are, where they are, then it's no longer about our egos then. And we can realize that our egos might be the greatest block to the best relationships we'll ever have.